aware that this training session will be recorded, and any of your questions, both verbal and text-based, and your likenesses, if using a webcam, will be included in the recording. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to this Daily Digital Micro Webinar. The Daily Digital Micro Webinars are run every Friday, and they're an addition to our Daily Digitals that run at noon every day, and just gives you a couple of hints and tips regarding digital skills. So today we're going to be looking at how you can position your images using the wraparound function in Microsoft Word. There's a bit of a perception in Word that whenever you move anything around and you've got any images in your documents, that those images will just get shunted around the place and will leap across the screen and will be very difficult to manage. And although that is sort of true to an extent, you can manage images fairly effectively in Word. So let me pop open a example document here. Okay, so hopefully you guys can all see that on your screens. So in this example document, there's currently no imagery in here at all. So let's say I'm going to just put an example image in here. I'll just put the cursor wherever I want the image to be placed. So I'll place it just at the start of this paragraph here. I'll use the insert button. Then I'll use the pictures menu. And I've already got an example folder here where I've got some images I want to use. So I'm just going to insert this initial image. It's got some nice mounted top imagery here. And when the image is first placed in the Word document, it places it wherever the cursor was originally set up. And then when you click the image itself, you'll notice that in the top corner of the image, you'll get this little icon here. And this icon is your layout options. So if I click that layout options, you'll see that at the moment, the very first option we are currently set at is inline with text. So what this broadly means is that this image currently, it's treated exactly the same as if it was a character in the text. And I can show you that if I make the image smaller here, just click the handles and drag it, you can see that the text stops on this paragraph. And because the image is part of this new paragraph and it's at the start of it, you see that the rest of the text carries on from the end of the image. And if I was to click and drag this image around the place, so for example, you can see the cursor is now moving. If I put the cursor in the middle of this paragraph and then release it, the image moves to that area and it's now actually within the paragraph directly. So you see that the text flows like it around it, but not like properly around it. So if we use the layout options again, we can move this from inline with text, and we can instead use the square option, for example. So if I use the square option, now the image will flow around that, the text will flow around that image as if it was like a square obstacle within the text, essentially. If I move that here to the start of that paragraph, now you see that the text will flow quite neatly around that image. So that makes it a little bit easier to read, and it's not creating lots of negative space on the page. Other options you've got is top and bottom. So if I click top and bottom, now that text will still flow around the image, but it won't flow to the left and right of it, but it will flow around it quite neatly. This is most useful when you've got like wider images, or if you want to really kind of draw attention to an image. So that will work quite well. I'm going to set this one back to being square. I'm going to put that there. So let's have a look at some other options we can do with this. Another option you've got is behind the text, which is this one here, or in front of the text. So these ones are a little bit more specific. If I set this image to be behind the text, it literally places it behind the text. And you can see now that the text is showing through it, and it's not actually affected anymore by the text wrapping. Likewise, if I use in front of the text, again, it puts the image directly in front of the text itself, and it doesn't wrap around it at all. So these are quite useful, I guess, for possibly watermarking it or putting like decorative images on your Word document. But on the whole, it's not really good for actually integrating your image into your text itself. So I'm going to put this back to the square layout here. So let's add in some other different types of images and see what we can do. Let's say, for example, you've got an image that's got some transparency built into it. So if you're using a PNG document, for example, PNG documents can support transparency. And Word has got some quite clever coding that will actually use that transparency in with its text. So let's insert again. I'm going to grab another picture. And this time I've got these chess pieces. So here's that chess piece image here. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller so it's a bit more manageable. And as you can see, as when we input this image initially, it's still part of the text. So now, under text wrapping, you've got options called tight and through. So if I try tight to begin with, let's see what that does here. And you can see immediately that image now, the transparent areas are being blocked out and the text is actually overrunning the transparent bits. And if I go for the through option, this won't do much in this case because there's no other transparent bits within the image. But if there were other transparent areas in this image, like for example, if there was like a hole in one of these chess pieces, then text could show through that hole as well. So tight and through will utilize any transparent areas of the image. Sometimes you might want to put an image into Word that has white areas, but doesn't actually have transparency built in. So for example, here, I've imported this image. This is a straightforward black and white image. I'll set this to be through. But because there's no transparency built into the actual image itself, you'll notice that the text doesn't actually use this white area. So this is where you can actually specify in Word and make a block image actually have some limited transparency. It doesn't work brilliantly, but it will at least let you have some sort of transparency to it. And when you click on an image, you've got the format tools in the top here. And just to the left, you've got the remove background. So when I click on remove background, the computer will then try and guess where you want this background to be removed. And then you can use these icons up here to mark areas to remove. You can literally just draw in these things. And then you can mark the areas that you want to keep. So I'm going to try and keep some of the tree, some of the bench. It's not perfect. It doesn't really kind of work too well with these kind of fiddly sort of images. But if I draw that like that, so you can see now it is letting me keep some areas, although you might find that you'll have a better chance of making this work if you do this in like a program like Photoshop or something instead. But here we go. We've got some initial areas removed now. So if I see if I can make that a bit more finessed, there we go. So then I can keep the changes. And there we go. We can see now that is now making a transparent area on that image. And if I move this around, you'll see I can move this to the right of the screen. That's doing a better job of blending that text into the image there. When I use the layout options, you've also got the option to fix the image on the page or move the image with the text. And you've got the See More functionality as well. And See More will basically just give you a little bit more options as to how far into the image the padding will work, or how the image is actually placed on the screen. So you've got some quite precise options for managing your image within Word. Last of all, you've got the anchor function. So whenever you place an image into Word, you'll notice that you'll have a small anchor graphic here. That'll appear whenever you select your image. And what that anchor does, that tells you what paragraph that image is linked to. So here you can see I moved this image across to the right of the screen, but to make it so that it's easy for me to keep track of the image, I can see that the anchor is part of this paragraph here. So if I was to move this down, you can see that the image moves with that particular paragraph. If I select the image and then move the anchor and say I put the anchor to this paragraph instead, now if I move this paragraph down, it still moves. But if I move this paragraph now, the image will move with that one instead. So you can use the anchor to specify exactly where your image is going to be linked to. I mean, I could link this up further. I could link it to this paragraph up here. And now if I move this paragraph, you'll see that that text will instead move around that image, which is no longer moving. So that'll give you guys a little bit of a brief introduction as to how you can move your images in Word and lock them in place and, you know, have them kind of stay where you want them to stay, really. But before I go ahead and finish up the recording, does anybody have any questions or anything you'd like me to recap?